Got that old muddy water north, salty water south, Chesapeake Bay Blues is what this song's about. What's going on, y'all? Episode 4 of season 3. Super pumped to have Kambotrout on tonight. I feel like Steven and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now, and strangely, this virtual format, that this condition that we're all in right now, has made this a lot easier to do. Just a little bit of news before I bring him on. Next week, we're going to have Tommy Robinson from Amped Up Outdoors. And after that, we're going to have author of Light Tackle Trolling the Chesapeake Bay, Alan Batista, and also author of the Jigging Book. Also coming up, all of the guys from Chesapeake Outdoor Sports. That would be Kambotrout, myself, Crazyhorse, Sam from Outdoors in Maryland, and Kevin from Bass Rack Outdoors. We're going to do a little fishing tournament where the trash talk has already gotten pretty harsh, but we're going to keep that amongst the four of us. But I don't know, man. I'm wondering if we should live stream it. Let me bring in Cambo here and see what he thinks. I don't know. What do you think, Kambotrout? You think we should live stream this thing?
You know, it's I got to see if we're catching fish first, man. I got an image to maintain, like I know what I'm doing. So, if we're catching fish, yeah, man, let's live stream it. Yeah. Although I guess the trash talk could get people, could entertain people too.
You bring up a really good point, because both you and I are YouTubers. Admittedly different level of YouTubers, but like people only see when we're catching fish.
Yeah.
Right? This is like hours of fishing that no fish are coming in the boat.
Yeah, I mean, my average outing is probably in the neighborhood of at least 5 hours on the water. So don't let me front on y'all and make you think that I'm nailing 10 snakehead within the span of 20 minutes. 9 times out of 10, that's not how it's going.
You just like shocked. We have 18 people on right now. 9 of them right now are like, what? Catch a fish like Roland Martin on every cast.
Yeah, dude.
How you doing, brother?
Dude, I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm really happy to have Kambotrout on. If you don't know, he's Stephen Kambotrout Kamboris. He served in the U.S. Army for 12 years. So thank you for your service, bro. He's also a graduate of Johns Hopkins University. He works at American Fisheries Society, which I don't really have on the agenda to talk about, but I think that's pretty cool. So if you want to chat about that later.
Absolutely.
He's also been fishing since he was 2 years old. That's hard to imagine, a 2-year-old fishing, but and since moving back to Maryland after serving in the Army, he's been really, I would say, in love with targeting snakehead, northern snakehead. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair, dude.
Awesome. He's placed and won several snakehead tournaments, and he runs a YouTube channel that features some of the best snakehead footage and content available. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, like, first of all, crawl out from underneath the rock that you've been underneath. And like, I don't care. I won't even be offended. You can get off of this right now and go, and then come back on. But like, when I first started watching your channel, you're gonna laugh, but the first thing I thought was like, this guy's so well spoken. I can clearly understand that he's catching snakehead.
It's a skill you have to develop when you're in the military. Like, because what big thing? Oh, my wife's dropping stuff. She might be on camera later, so y'all can look forward to that. But when it comes to like the military, especially as a non-commissioned officer, warrant officer, something you have to be prepared to do is be able to speak, because you have to train soldiers. So whether you're comfortable with it when you go in the military or not, you're going to become comfortable with it. So tip of the hat to the military for getting me there.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I noticed that right away with you. It's something that it's with a deep voice, and it's not something that's been natural to me. But as a lot of you guys probably know, I record all my own music for my channel, and that was one, like when I was a lot younger, and I would go to recording studios and stuff like that. That was one of the first things that I picked up on. I was like, oh, the music sounds cool, but nobody can understand what I'm saying. So like. And then just hearing my recorded voice over and over again, it really pushed me to speak more clearly. But nobody's here for like diction. Let's talk about snakehead, man. So you've been fishing your entire life. What is it about northern snakehead that got you so passionate about targeting them?
Yeah, dude. So it's a long list, to be honest. First of all, like, snakehead, especially northern snakehead, will take you to some of the most beautiful waters you're ever going to fish. And oftentimes, if you're motivated about it, some of the most isolated and untouched waters you're going to fish. Because generally speaking, there haven't been very many sport fish in these tidal marshes and these back bays and super shallow water with heavy vegetation. It's really been kind of untouched ground for the most part. But now you have a fish that can grow up to 10, 15, or even close to 20 pounds in super shallow water in this thick cover in these beautiful tidal marshes we have on Maryland's eastern shore, actually really throughout the entirety of the bay. So that's point one. It's like when you make it there, and I make it a point to be there at first light, when you're on the water at first light and you see the sunrise come up around you and you hear the world come alive and the ambient noise of the insects and the birds, and then you hear that snakehead pop over in the weeds, it's just beautiful. I live for being on the water at that time. It's just magical. So that's point one with snakehead. Point two, snakehead, one thing that sets them apart from many other fish is that it's a fight from beginning to end. Whether that end is you releasing it or that end is you killing and harvesting it, chaos could erupt at any moment, because they're air breathers. Like most other fish, you take them out of the water and they're slowly like losing consciousness, essentially, because they can't get oxygen. Snakehead aren't like that. Snakehead bide their time. They look around. They plan their escape routes. And like if you fish for them long enough, you'll see that, because they'll find that one little alcove, that one little path to freedom that you didn't realize was there, and they'll exploit it. So that's the other thing, is they're such a handful and a challenge to handle, and I love a challenge like that. Then you have, of course, the fact that they love to take topwater lures, and that's the most fun fishing you're going to have is on topwater. And I think the last major thing is the sound of a snakehead hit. It's unlike any other hit you've ever heard in your life. It's so signature. Once you get into snakehead fishing and you hear that pop a couple different times throughout the day, you'll go to bed dreaming about it. And it's just, I love it. I live for that. And I mean, of course, they're probably the best eating fish in freshwater, in my opinion. The meat to body ratio.
Double thumbs up.
Yeah. The firm whiteness of the meat. They even have really kind of low bioaccumulation rates, and there's some debate as to why that is, but that means that there's less contaminants, generally speaking, in snakehead until they get up like around 10, 15 pounds. Then you might have, exceed thresholds for things like mercury. But I mean, top to bottom, snakehead have taken waters that, in terms of sport fishing, were completely unproductive and made them prime waters that, it's, obviously I'm in love with the fish, man. They have so much going for them, and of course we can have the invasive discussion later. It's not all positive. There is some potential negative out there, but they're incredible fish, incredible parents. It's a long list of wildlife snakehead there.
The parent issue is really cool, but it's funny you mentioned the pop, and obviously this is like your passion that you target. But like all the snakeheads I catch, like I don't get pop. It's either boom or like nothing, or like I'll get it, I'll get one waking on me and will leave it alone. That happens to me all the time. But yeah. The snakehead that I have caught, which haven't been a lot, I haven't spent a ton of time targeting them. probably 20, 30 trips total. But like when I catch one, it is just chaos. So go ahead.
I say that's a good point, is that I've had 30-inch snakehead hit like maniacs, and I've had 30-inch snakehead suck it down so quietly you almost can't even perceive that you've got a hit. So my wife in the background, sorry. But that's one point that I should make to you, like aspiring snakehead fishermen out there, or the guys who are new to the game. You can't really judge the size of a snakehead based on the hit, because even a 30-plus inch snakehead can stalk a lure to the point where you won't know they're there, and just do a nice soft take, just enough to take it down. And when you set that, you don't know what you have really until you set that hook and get eyes on that fish, because sometimes it could be a little guy, sometimes it could be a 30-incher, and you just don't know. So always put everything you have into the hook sets with those fish.
That's great. We do have questions rolling in, but I will say that, you know, in the pre-show tonight, Kambotrout and I were talking, and it was kind of hinted that Adrian, the better half, the funnier half, might be available tonight, should that be a request. But this question comes in from, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I think it's Mary Barden. And the question is, do snakeheads bite in the winter?
Great question. Okay, so there's a little bit of nuance to it, but I'll break it down best I can. So in the winter, their activity slows way down. It's like point blank, like that's a bottom line truth. It slows way down. So the best time to target snakehead in the winter is going to be after a 2 or 3 day warm spell. You want to target that second or third day in the warm spell, and you want to start fishing for them around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, fish till about 5. That's probably the latest 6. But the bottom line is you're trying to find that time window where the water has warmed to its maximum. And in order to fish for them in that kind of condition, you want to have minnows. I know some guys who actually bottom fish minnows for snakehead. I haven't really done it. I've always used a float for them. But I'll take 1 or 2 rods, cast out minnows on the float. In the winter, I run them a little bit deeper, probably down around 18, down to about 36 inches, depending on the depth of the water I'm fishing. And then I'll fan cast with a Mepps spinner. About, if you're not familiar with fan casting, I'm casting, you know, in a fan around me. I don't know how else to describe it, but essentially that area in front of me, I'm going to fan cast all the way across it. And that's really the best shot you have. So the short answer is that you can catch them in winter. I've caught them in December. I don't think I've tried for them in January yet. I've caught them in February. And then March is usually when it starts heating back up. Like really the bite starts heating back up in March, depending on how fast the year happens to be warming. So the short answer is that you can catch them in the winter, but it's generally going to be very slow action. And you're definitely risking a skunk by going out there. And if there's ice on the water, I'm probably not going to spend my time on that. I'll go chase trout or, you know, some type of cold water fish. They're not a cold water fish, but it is possible to catch them in the winter.
Yeah, I always go off script a little bit, but I try to think when I'm doing these interviews of guys that, you know, were maybe like me when they moved to this region and, you know, knew nothing about it. They see these awesome pictures with Kambotrout holding this giant dragon. Like, other than that, like the background is the grasses that are everywhere around here. And that could be in the middle of the bay or it could be in God knows where. So like, you know, think about a guy that's never done this, right? Like, yep. Can you give him like, and I think you and I are both the same way. Like we're not giving spots. Like that's half the fun of it, right? Is finding your own spots. But like, what are some areas that someone might want to start to look?
So the first thing I'm going to do is plug my channel real quick, because one of my most recent videos is how to find snakehead spots. And in there, I run you through the different tools that I use to find snakehead waters. Because like Maryland DNR has a tracker online. It's actually, they don't host it, but they link to it. It's actually ran by USGS that shows all the reported catches of snakehead throughout the country. Really cool resource. So that's one way you can find snakehead waters. Other tools out there are great for it, like FishBrain. It's a love-hate relationship. FishBrain is the ultimate spot burning tool, but it's a great resource too. So if you're trying to use it, that's one great way to do it. But the other thing I would say about finding snakehead spots is that Snakehead, generally speaking, especially during the spring. During the spring, they do what's called a spring push, and they move upstream to spawn. And they'll move essentially upstream until they hit an obstacle, like a dam or essentially falls that you just can't get past. So even after that spring push, they're generally going to be up in those tidal creeks, especially, or just up in shallow water generally. In the very early spring, they're going to relate to whatever structure's there, be it the skeletonized roots of the spatterdock fields that you have on the eastern shore or timber. But as soon as that submerged aquatic vegetation comes up, they love the thickest grass they can find. So a great tool to find that is after you find the waters you want to fish. And to be clear, snakehead are in every single tributary to the bay at this point.
Yep.
So now it varies as to how many are there and what size they are, depending on the body of water. But they're in every single tributary. But one thing you can do is use Google Earth and look at what times of year, like shift the timeline. You can do this in the Google Earth desktop app. If you shift the timeline, it'll show you photos throughout the year. And what you can do with that is find where the grass grows up thickest, target those areas. They love the thickest grass they can find.
So something I've noticed in Kambotrout, maybe you can confirm this, is, particularly, with Blackwater, everyone, even though there's a huge, I really want people to get more into Westside to kind of spread out the anglers a little bit.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of nice if those areas around Blackwater didn't have 50 cars in them.
Yeah.
But one thing I've noticed in Blackwater is I spent a good 5 or 10 trips in areas that weren't productive because they were too salty.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And what I've noticed is I've just done better if you can find spatterdock and pads in those areas that are too salty. Those two things don't grow.
That's a great point, dude. Great point. Yeah, like a lot of the vegetation they like can't tolerate that saltier water. Now, to be clear, I've seen them in saltier water. Like I've heard reports from guys saying they've caught them in crab traps, things like that. So I'm not saying they're not out there. I'm just saying that the higher numbers are going to be farther towards the fresh water. So that's a great point. Look, that's a great visual cue, is to look for those things like spatterdock. If the spatterdock isn't there, then you probably want to keep going and finding some more fresh water to find those better numbers of snakehead.
Yeah, I caught one snakehead in the Blackwater area, in the areas that I didn't realize were too salty. One in probably 12 to 15 hours of fishing, but you get up around the pads in the spatterdock and it's a whole different game.
Whole different game. And
those are without giving away spots, those little rivers and creeks, they go way up, I guess north from Blackwater. Another sort of question or comment or request, Butch. What's going on, Butch? He says, show the Hollywood lure.
I don't have the Hollywood lure down here.
Where is it?
It's on my nightstand.
Is that the one he made you?
Yeah, the gold fleck.
Right.
Thank you, baby.
No.
Butch, we got you, bro.
Yeah, or Adrian's got you anyway.
Yeah, Adrian. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not doing anything but running my mouth over here. So
yeah. If y'all don't know, Butch is coming out, and he's real All-American fishing. He's a fellow Snakehead Outlaws elite team member, and he's got some custom lures coming out. And like Butch's trademark, if you don't watch his channel, is to put ribbit-type frogs on swim bait hooks, weighted swim bait hooks. And honestly, it's a presentation I've never been able to do effectively, so I'm toying with my gear to be able to do it, because if no one's catching anything, Butch will put on a weighted swim bait hook with one of these. Yes, thank you, baby. With one of these ribbit style lures.
Adrian.
Yep.
And tear him up. And this is what he called the Hollywood lure. That's a gold fleck, gold color lure.
Well, that one clearly won't work because it doesn't have a hook in
it. But that's how Butch envisions me right there. He's named it he's named it Hollywood.
The wrong color and the wrong nickname.
So once it's springtime, I'm going to be throwing them. He's got some other ones on there too. There we go.
Oh, those you know what? I don't know about catching the fish, but those are definitely catching the fishermen.
Yeah, dude.
Those are sexy.
Oh,
another question from Mary, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. How do you keep from snagging on the weeds?
Another great question. So
remember, Kambotrout, you're picking the best question of the night. So when you see a good one, log the names so we can be sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I might let Adrian pick. She got a better memory than I do.
That works. Yeah, Adrian. She's clearly a lot smarter than you are.
But that's undisputable. But so step number one is, if you're in thick cover, you of course want to use a weedless lure. And there's various different kinds of weedless lures, but most people are going to opt for like a Texas rigged swim bait or your topwater frogs and mice. So that's point number one, is you want to have a weedless lure. Point two is you can do things like putting a small bead in front of your lure. And what that bead will do is it'll help the lure bounce off the pads more, as opposed to getting stuck on the pads. And within the realm of topwater frogs especially, you often have a choice between a pointed nose and a concave, or like a popping nose. And the popping nose is going to get caught a lot more on weeds. So if you're fishing the real thick stuff, it's still doable. You know, I throw popping frogs inside of spatterdock. It's doable, but you are going to get stuck more. You know, you won't be truly snagged, generally speaking, but you will get stuck more. So make sure your lures are weedless. And you can put those little beads on the front, and that'll help kind of deflect the plants off before the lure gets really hung on it. Yeah,
when I'm snakehead fishing, I just take getting hung and getting stuck as just like part of what happens. You know. This question comes from our buddy Kevin Hogan. He says, Cambo, tell us about your best topwater mouse blow up and how not to miss the fish.
Oh, my best one. So my best one, without a
doubt, he won't tell you. So
my best one, without a doubt, came over in the Blackwater area. And at this point, I had gone far enough south in one of the creek arms there that the spatterdock had faded out, and it was really just reeds. Like if you go into Blackwater proper, Blackwater Lake area, the shoreline is just reeds. It's still really cool water. But I was really out on the hunt for just the biggest snakehead I could find. And one of the ways to catch the biggest snakehead you can find, and I hate to say this because, you know, it kind of hurts my feelings to see the big ones get harvested like this, but is during fry ball season. And that's what I was doing. And I wasn't keeping the big ones at this time, but I was catching them. And I was fishing a fry ball and seeing this fish's head come up and take it. Because if you haven't seen like a 10, 15 pound snakehead in person, the sides of their heads just get
whole different ball game. Yep.
Like, especially when they clench their jaws and their huge jaw muscles just flare out. Like their heads get just gargantuan. And I'm watching working my little mouse over this fry ball, and I just see this mouth come up, and the mouth just opens up and just sucked it down. It wasn't a violent hit, but it was protecting its fry. I set the hook, and that was my second biggest snakehead ever right there. And that thing, I think it came in, like I was using a spring-loaded lip grippers at the time that had a scale in it. I came home after the fact and weighed my dumbbells at home, and they weighed about a pound short, and the fish, when I had it on the water, weighed in at 15. So if it wasn't 16, it was real close. Yeah. And I mean, it's like when you hook a snakehead that big, you realize how little control you actually have. And you feel how much your gear can actually be pushed to the limits. Because personally, I've always been an ultralight fisherman. That's why I think my name Kambotrout. I grew up trout fishing. So even though I was using what would probably be like a medium heavy type rig, almost bordering on heavy, I had very little control over that fish. Like very little control. And if you actually look it up, I think it's called, on my channel, 15 pound snakehead, a day of monsters. And it's like when you're trying to hold a fish like that, their body profile already, because it's so long and slender, there's nothing really to grip. That makes it hard, number one. Number two, when the snakehead is stressed, its body exudes a ton of slime. So that's strike number two against you being able to handle that fish. Strike number three is that they are pure muscle and explosively powerful.
Get a net.
So, well, yeah, you definitely want to get a deep rubberized net. And I can explain why a deep rubberized net in a minute.
Why do I know these things?
Because you live with me, baby. That's why you know these things. But that fish was just absolutely beautiful. And it's
your mom's beautiful.
She is a pretty lady. My wife said my mom is beautiful. But anyway, but yeah, that was definitely my favorite take on the topwater mounts. Just everything from start to finish and handling the fish. And in that case, I did release it. And we can talk about that too, because I know a lot of people have heartburn about that, and we can get in the weeds on that, and I can explain that.
So I'm going to ask one of my questions, then I'll get to some of the other viewer questions.
Yep.
But so is it true if you leave a human baby too close to the shore that a snakehead will eat it? And then snakehead will eat all the bass and all the crappie and everything cute and wonderful. And they even eat happiness and colors. Is that true?
Every 10 seconds, they claim the life of another small child, man. But but in all seriousness, I don't want to downplay the threat of invasive impact from snakehead. Okay. It is true, and you'll hear me repeat it often, that the peer-reviewed published literature to this point hasn't demonstrated invasive impact from snakehead. With that being said, invasive impact can take decades to manifest. And there are reports from other areas, not peer-reviewed or published to my knowledge yet, that are showing impact. So I want to honestly communicate like my viewpoint is I try to stay open to new evidence. My threshold for evidence is pretty high. I'm not going to deny that. But thus far, snakehead have not proven to be the threat that we thought they would be. There's much bigger threats out there in the bay, in my opinion, especially blue catfish, things like that. But I do want to be clear that invasive impact, it could be manifesting, and the studies haven't been published yet, or it could manifest over a longer timeline. So do I love snakehead? Absolutely. Do I think that they're a fantastic sport fish and a great addition to these waters? In a way, yes. But are they from here? No. Do we know what effects they're going to have over a longer timeline? No. So I just try to provide like a nuanced view of what's going on out there.
Yeah. So not to push you on this, Kambotrout, because I don't disagree with you, but like if you go and spend 20 minutes at the Wolford store at any time, right, and talk to anybody who's been around Blackwater long enough, they'll tell you that 10 to 15 years ago, it was easy to go there and catch a bunch of slab-sized crappie.
Yeah.
And the frogs too, right? And they're saying, those guys will tell you that those populations are just like completely flattened.
And I have friends on the Eastern Shore who land on both sides of the fence, because when I go out there in the spring, do I hear frogs chirping everywhere? Yes, I do. Yeah. Now, have I been going out to the Eastern Shore for 10, 15, 20 years? No. I was in the military. I was born in Maryland, but I was in the military for 12 years. So
multifactorial issue.
Yeah. That's the other point, is that
ecology is a multifactorial issue.
I don't know if you can hear Adrian, but what she's saying is ecology is a multifactorial issue. And what that means is that you have more than one variable and that you're trying to account for in an environment whenever you're trying to determine what the cause is of an environmental change. So it's a complicated topic, and that's why I keep my threshold for evidence really high in terms of like peer-reviewed published evidence, because you have to account for all these different considerations. Okay, what's the rainfall been? What's the water quality been?
What's the oxygen saturation?
Like how oxygen saturation, salinity. It's like how much. It's a long list. It's a long list of considerations that you really, if you want to be serious about researching it, and that's something I like to do. And maybe it's a good dovetail into the American Fishery Society. The American Fishery Society, if you're not familiar with it, because I wasn't. I fished my whole life, and I had no idea.
Why are you familiar with the American Fishery Society, Dave?
Adrian, just get on the camera.
Yeah, come on over here.
I'm coming.
But I work at AFS, and AFS is essentially the nation's, and I think the world's.
Wait, hold on. Can we just show like how good of a wife I am? Like I'm watching. Just.
Oh, I should just invite you to the stream, and you can make your own set.
I'm good.
And endlessly supportive. I owe my job at AFS to Adrian. She's the one who found it.
And made him apply to it.
And made me apply to it. But the reason I say this conversation dovetails nicely there is that one of the functions
Don't keep talking.
One of the functions of AFS is to publish in the Fisheries magazine, the Fisheries Journal, the latest fisheries science. So things like the 2018 International Snakehead Symposium, that's something that, by virtue of my position at AFS, I come into contact with all of the most recent science that's coming out there on various fisheries topics. And that's where I found out about the symposium. That's how I contacted John Odenkirk. And that's how I ended up doing the interview with him. And if you're not familiar with John Odenkirk, he's a fisheries biologist with the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. And he was the one who actually organized the symposium for snakehead. So
I should have waited to come on.
yeah, no, right. But yeah, if y'all have questions for Adrian, feel free to throw those out here too. I'm sure she'll only. No,
Adrian,
she'll only marginally embarrass me, but that's not true. She's gonna.
Adrian
Look what you did.
He gets to pick the winner.
Yeah, so I only heard a couple questions. I heard like the top water and how to not miss the fish question.
Oh, I never answered that.
And you did, and I said get a net and all that, and you did. You talked about the fry and the best day ever, and you plugged your video. Like I heard you, you did.
But keys to not losing a snakehead or making a successful hook set: keep your drag tight. Use at least I would say probably 30-pound braid at this point, and put everything.
Get your phone charger.
Thank you, babe. And put everything you have into the hook set, because snakehead have very hard mouths. I also have a video out there on Chesapeake Outdoor Sports about how to bend up and slightly out the hooks on your topwater frogs and mice. Because a lot of hooks on topwater frogs and mice, when they come stock out of the package, the hooks are either too parallel or pointing slightly down. It increases their weedless capacity, but it greatly decreases their hookup ratio. So there's little tweaks you can do to the lures themselves to make your hookups, go up a lot.
Our guy Tommy Tech Outdoors, man, he's bringing the heat on this question, man.
Uh-oh.
Is it a divorce question?
I'm looking forward to clicking this, but I'm also hesitant. But here we go.
Bring it.
Does this USB not work?
Which do you prefer, east side or
west side or east side?
Here's this side. So east side or west side? I mean, up to about 2 years ago, I would say unequivocally that it was the east side.
It.
Thank you, baby. Because she got me a phone charger because I came unprepared. But
as usual.
Yes. I always get to the water and forget something. But so here's the story, of course, is that snakehead, with the exception of the Potomac and, the pond, that original introduction, they grew in numbers and size far more on the east side early in the introduction phase than they have on the west side. However, I've now caught and seen massive fish and massive numbers of snakehead on the west side.
I'm going to go.
So, you going to go? You going to go fishing?
I'm not. No, I'm going to leave and finish celebrating.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. I also got a raise today. So.
Oh, you got a promotion?
Promotion, sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Boom! That's a
celebratory dinner and.
Yes.
You know what? That's just going to mean they expect more from you, and you're going to have less fishing trips. So just telling you.
Hopefully, they pay him accordingly.
So they can't expect much more from you. Right. It's only so many hours in the day.
If they expect more from you, you're going to end up being the director of AFS.
well, how about this, Adrian? As a farewell, we have one comment for you.
Oh, I saw it.
I love Adrian. We all love you, Adrian. You're fantastic.
If y'all haven't seen the video of mine where she does commentary on my best catches of 2020, all
right. The line of the night of that, and this is just my opinion, is so it's Kambotrout giving commentary and his videos, and then Adrian giving commentary on the videos, and in the video, Steven says, "Man, look at that fish."
Fuck that fish.
Yeah, fuck that fish. But she's like, Kambo's like, look at that fish. It's thick. And Adrian goes,
I'm thick too.
I literally, like, people say LOL sometimes, or like I fell out of my chair. Like, I think I literally fell out of my chair.
I mean, he goes fishing. I'm playing with this. He goes fishing every week. And somebody asked in the comments, how do you deal with him sweet talking to fish? I hate it. I don't know if I conveyed that enough on that commentary video. I hate it because Steven, outside of talking to fish, is completely closed off, has no emotions whatsoever. And I don't know if I got that across to his viewers, but the man does not have emotions, still trapped. So for me to go from married to a steel trap to, oh, that fish is so beautiful. Look at it, such protective parent. And, oh my gosh, it's so thick and beautiful. I love you, fish. I'm gonna kiss you.
I have no defense.
I know you don't.
I love you.
See, if you watch his videos, you think that you're like the most pampered over, cared for, loved wife on earth. I know.
First
People
of all,
are
I
like,
don't
man,
think that. Clearly, I don't
how's it
think
gonna?
that. Second of all, no. That's just
funny.
how he talks to his first love of his life, the fish.
First, but no longer first.
There you go. Well done, Cambo. Well done. We got a question from. Oh, actually, you know, I don't think. Did you finish the East versus West question?
If I haven't, I'll put it this way.
I prefer when he stays on this side of the bridge.
I'm going to be fishing the west side a lot more this year because the fish numbers are way up, the fish size is way up, and the commute's a lot less. I'll save a lot on gas money and a lot of miles on my car, and I won't have to deal with the return beach traffic on Sundays because Sunday is my fishing day. And once
I really want to get home to my wife and family. I don't want to sit in traffic on the way home.
I misspoke. What I meant to say.
No, it's already come out. You already said it. Sentence has already gone out into the internet.
Question from Joshua Dixon. He says, do you think the record will be broken this year?
Oh, hell yeah. I really do. And congrats to Josh, by the way. If y'all don't know, he just set the new state record for flathead catfish. He caught an absolutely massive flathead catfish on the Susky while jigging for either perch or walleye. It might have been walleye. But either way, imagine the gear you would be using to catch, jigging walleye, and then you catch a 50-plus pound
I can't imagine.
new state record flathead. So first of all, props to Josh for that catch right there. Second of all, yes, I really do think the record's going to be broken because there's places on the west side now that have so little fishing pressure because it's off limits. And the forage base there is so insane. Like I caught a 32-inch snakehead there, like 32 and a half, but let's just say 32 inches. That thing weighed 14 pounds. Over 14 pounds. It was only 32 inches long. That thing, it's like if you have that much thickness in a 32 and a half inch fish, you take it up to the length of snakehead I've seen, which is up close to 40 inches, and keep that same thickness, record's done. No doubt in my mind.
Smash.
Yeah, it's coming. I really do believe it's going to be broken this year.
I got another question from our man Butch. She says, how long until we see a tandem kayak footage?
Never.
So if I can find the most beautiful place on earth and get her there at sunrise for photography, because we used to do something similar to that down in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. And we have not done it since.
But we haven't done it since. So I won't say it's impossible, but it's improbable. I'll have to see what I can work there because that would be great to have you.
I mean, but then you also have to take into account, like, my schedule's ridiculous. I mean,
go ahead.
I am getting a whole PhD right now. So
yeah.
Not just a half, not just the P and the H.
Yeah, a whole PhD. So, like, my schedule is really unpredictable. And then on top of that, we have 3 kids. If she didn't really understand that they exist, they like to take care, like to let you know that they exist every once in a while.
I'm surprised they aren't down here yet.
Just every once in a while. So, then I mean, I'm not getting no kayak. Like.
She used to come with me all the time.
Those tandem kayaks are super stable, by the way. I mean, they're like it's like a yacht. I mean,
she used to come with me all the time when we were in Colorado. But
that's because we were dating.
Dating, yes. She was hooking me at the time.
We were dating.
But it's like 11-mile canyon. This beautiful canyon out in
Colorado.
And that
wasn't in a boat. That was.
I love it. I love it. Did you just say she was trying to hook you? Yeah,
apparently I needed to put in effort.
That's a big lie. Yeah.
Apparently, I had to put in some effort.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Ouch. Question from Dave McCollum. Bye, Adrian.
Bye.
Do you consider pulling adult fish off a fry ball, picking the low-hanging fruit? Man, we got a family affair tonight.
Yeah, it's a great question from Dave. My short answer is yes. There's no two ways about it. Snakehead are very protective of their young. I know a lot of guys who are purists who will literally stop fishing for snakehead during the spawn because they have that kind of level of respect for the fish. And I won't harvest off a fry ball, but just let you know there's echelons above me when it comes to like real care of the snakehead. But it is without doubt one of the easiest ways to catch them because a fry ball, you can track it. Like you can see the bubbles from the fry because that's what they're doing. The fry have to surface very often. I mean, probably in the neighborhood of like every few seconds to minutes at most. They have to surface that often. So they're easy to find, easy to track down, and the parents are very protective. So it's almost the definition of a little hanging fruit. It's a great question. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. So Alan Batista kind of answered Sue's question, but I want to dive into this a little bit more because I know when I first started on the learning curve, which is snakehead fishing, like people say, oh, it's just like largemouth bass. And like that'll get you a good ways, but then like there's a whole lot of other stuff to learn.
Yes.
And I think Sue's question that Alan answered well could use more digging. And I feel bad about asking this, but what is a fry ball? And what I want to add to that, going back to my early days fishing for snakehead, is like I couldn't tell what it looked like. I was always wondering if a couple of minnows on the surface was a fry ball.
Yep.
So like, if you could help Sue with that basic question, and then an idea of how to identify that.
Sure. So it's even as an experienced snakehead angler, like from a distance, say like 20, 30 yards or more, you're going to mistake a small school of minnows for a fry ball. It's going to happen. It still happens to me. So, but what you're looking for, you can look for a bubble trail. That's one thing, especially if it's a big fry ball. And you'll follow that bubble trail to the fry ball itself. That's one way to track it down. Now, fry, for someone who asked, fry are what they call snakehead young. And snakehead, up until probably around 5 inches or so, they stay in one big ball together, like a school.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they stayed all the way to 5 inches.
About 4 or 5 inches from what I've seen and read. And during that time, they're essentially completely dependent on their parents for protection. So on the one hand, they're very. On the one hand, what are you doing?
She's trying to be a cat.
Oh God. On the one hand, it's a great kind of evolutionary trait and benefit in that snakehead are very protective of their young. Like I have some great underwater video of them. It's fascinating and beautiful to me, to be honest. At the same time, makes them very vulnerable. So that's what a fry ball is. And the way I tell you, you track them down by bubble trails, but you'll see in the distance what looks like a tiny school of minnows, or it could be as big as 6 or 7 feet around if it was a larger female laying those eggs. But that's what you're going to see. It's going to look like a school of small fish that repeatedly come up to the surface, and you'll see little bubbles from their mouths, breathing oxygen, feeding. And it's one more thing that makes snakehead a really cool fish to me, is
right.
that it's completely different from anything I've really encountered before. Like snakehead, of course, bass, of course, guard their beds. And the males will stick around and guard their young to some degree for a little while, but nothing like snakehead. Like snakehead, until the young are at least 4 or 5 inches, will stick around and protect their young.
So when for a lot of anglers around here that are Chesapeake Bay anglers, they target striped bass or rockfish, and there's a lot of concern about mortality rates. Based on the type of hook that you use, based on the season that you're catching them, right? For people that are have that concern about catching a mother and father snakehead off of a fly ball. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the mortality rate when if you were to catch one of those and then put it back in the water?
So one danger you run into whenever you're catching any kind of fish that's protecting its bed or its young is whether or not that fish, even if you release it, is going to return to protect that bed or the young. Because there's evidence out there that sometimes they won't. Sometimes they be too traumatized or fearful, whatever it is. I don't know why, but there is evidence that happens. So, on the one hand, again, I want to be honest. Like I don't want to just come out here and say like pro snakehead all day long.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not saying don't harvest snakehead. I harvest snakehead. You know, my family loves snakehead. Everyone who have had taste snakehead loves snakehead. And snakehead have very high fecundity, which means that they have a lot of young, and they reproduce based on the gonad somatic index, based on the most recent science that I've seen. They do reproduce at least twice a year, whereas most fish species only reproduce once a year. So in an environment where fish like striped bass, where the stock has been really over harvested, where it's in decline, snakehead are a great kind of pressure relief valve for striped bass because people can transition over to snakehead. They have another fish that grows large, it's a lot of fun to catch, that's great eating. So while I personally won't keep fish off a fry ball, if you're going out there and you want to catch fish for your family or yourself or whatever, take home and eat some, you know, again, I won't keep them off a fry ball, but I don't blame people for keeping snakehead. You know, they're a great tasting fish and they do reproduce quickly. Like, we're never going to get rid of snakehead. Like, I don't care what you do at this point. They're far too
Here to stay. Yeah.
enduring of a fish, too tough of a fish. They can tolerate conditions that most other fish can't tolerate. You're never going to get rid of them. It's just a question of, and this is where the real divide comes in, is the goal complete control and to drive down their numbers as much as we possibly can? Or is the goal to have a snakehead fishery in which you can go out and catch a lot of big fish and have, like, 15, 20 fish days? There's good arguments on both sides of this. I want to be absolutely clear. There's good arguments on both sides. I happen to side on kind of the longer positive view of snakehead, but there's good arguments on the other side too. So you want to keep some snakehead and eat some at home, man, keep them. They taste great. But I also respect the fish for all the qualities I've already listed. I think they're incredible.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Question from Tim Wood. Question: how does the wind affect the bite? That facial expression makes me think he might be in the running for question of the evening.
Wind is a 4-letter word for a reason, man. It's like,
he won't go if it's too windy.
It's like the one thing that can
and then he'll cry.
I really will. My wife's saying I will cry if it's too windy out, and I will. I really won't go out for snakehead if it's too windy, unless I know of a small creek where I can go that has huge trees on both shorelines, so I'm roughly shielded from the wind. The wind will, a lot of times, in most cases, shut down the snakehead bite. I mean, especially for topwater, because once you have that much disturbance on the surface, the effect of your topwater lure is going to be greatly degraded, because whatever sound creating capacity it had now has to compete with all the ambient noise of all these waves. Like, if it's perfectly calm, fish can see the disturbance, they can hear the disturbance, they can feel it. When the wind is there, it's a pain, and it's going to blow your kayak, or maybe you're on shore, but either way, it's going to take your lure, it's going to mess with you in all kinds of different ways. And generally speaking, on windy days, the snakehead bite has not been good for me. It just has not. Now, the ways to get around that: number one, like I already said, find those creeks that have trees on both shorelines, because it'll shield you from the wind. Or find those protected coves. So again, go on Google Earth, look at the wind forecast, see which direction it's going to be blowing out of, and then pick your spots and plan them for your trip coming up. Okay, well, I'll go here because that cove right there should be shielded from the wind. Or just cast really, like I've seen it, the wind kind of drive them really deep back into cover. So there's ways to get around it. And, if I really want to go fishing, I'm going to be out there, but the wind is a real hassle, man. It's a real hassle for snakehead fishing.
Yeah. I mean, I fish mostly on the bay, on the salty bay that doesn't have snakehead in it. And, I started fishing on the bay from a kayak, and maybe that spoiled me a little bit, but I've got a center view fish off my boat.
Yeah.
And if the wind's over 10 miles an hour, I still don't go. It's just not fun, right? I like to fish top water. I still fish very much like I would from a kayak.
Yep.
And, it's the wind. I'm going to steal that. The wind is a 4-letter word for a reason.
Bro. I hate the wind. I hate it.
Got some more questions rolling in now. People chose the last 10 minutes to just nail me with them. Butch, that's a great question. I'm going to come back to that if I can get to it. But I'm going to try to get some people that haven't had their questions answered yet. This is funny. I'll just throw walleye pizza up here.
Oh God, what's up?
asking if squealing with glee while fishing for snakes is good or bad. He'll laugh.
Apparently, he thinks it's good.
It's a so if you watch my videos, and Pete knows this well because I've been out on his charter, and he's had to reprimand me several times because I get excited. Like I love fishing, and this is like actually a great spot for you to come back in.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear my exclamations, my yells, my whoops, my hollers, my
in no
angry
other space
talk,
of his
my
life.
sweet talk. I become very emotive whenever I'm fishing.
No other space in his life.
Oh, but it's like it's funny, but it's also one of the things that makes you a good YouTuber. Like one of the problems that I have is that I'm when I'm fishing, I'm a pretty quiet guy. So what I have to do is go back and do voiceovers in my videos, or else it's just silent and dead, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's it's like
be married to him.
Like I edit the video so you don't see the time that I'm quiet. When I'm fishing, I'm generally like dead quiet until I see it, until I see a fish rise, until I see a fish blow up, until he hits my lure, and then you're gonna hear me, and you're gonna know I'm on a fish. And Pete knows that well because we used to go out on the real skinny water on his boat on a striper charter. And I had what was probably, and I was over exaggerating that day, but honestly, probably about a 30-inch striper hit it right at the boat. I mean, right at the boat.
Wow.
Oh my
God! You said striper, right?
Yeah.
I like striper.
Yeah, they're tasty fish.
No, I like catching them.
Oh, you like really?
Remember I caught them?
Yeah.
They're not as slimy, yeah.
Yeah.
Question from Michael. Question from Michael. You think snakeheads will replace largemouth bass as the money fish in the industry? Wow.
That's a great question.
It's
Excellent
a good
question.
sport fish.
It is.
Because it's a challenge and they're fun to catch.
I mean, snakehead, and it may take a generation because this is where I'm going to get a little philosophical on you.
Oh my God.
But people tend to.
I'm sorry ahead of time.
People tend to accept as normal that which they're born into. So, like, that's part, not all by any means, but that's part of why there's a lot of anti-snakehead sentiment out there, because it's a foreign species introduced in our ecosystem that wasn't there when we grew up in these waters.
When my daddy was here.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah. So, but within a generation, you're going to have kids who are coming on the water who are going to kind of accept snakehead as a normal thing. And that same type of animus or bias towards the species is not going to be there. So it may take, a decade or two. It may take a generation. But to answer his question, yes. Like snakehead, in my opinion, are the superior sport fish because of the areas they take you to, all the reasons I already gave you, the chaos from beginning to end. It's like if you've seen my videos and you see the chaos that these snakehead can cause in your kayak, imagine that on a show like Bassmasters. Imagine it on that scale and how entertaining that would be to the audience. Like it's coming.
I'm able to answer that question easily because you can imagine how much I hear that around the house.
Well, and I think a good indicator is we got up over, I think, 55, 60 viewers at one point. That's twice as much as I've had so far. So I think snakehead, I mean, you guys are okay, but I think the topic is really exciting to people right now. Kristen Fisher, I think it's her. It's actually, it's Keenan Fisher using his wife's page.
I ain't sure how it works.
First time he's tuned in.
On Facebook.
Sorry, Keenan. What do you think is the best way to find and get to the prime snakehead spots? Boat, wadding. I think he means wading. Now I'm picking on his spelling. I mean, this poor guy.
You know what getting into, man.
Yeah.
Tall grass, right?
Yeah, it's for the best way.
Boat, bank, wadding, or
in my opinion, kayaking's best. And here's why. Like I've waited for them. I haven't been on a boat yet for them, but I have buddies who do, like Greg Hall. He has a bass boat, fishes for him all the time. Kayaks, generally speaking, are going to get you places that nothing else can. Literally nothing else can, because you're going to go back in these super shallow bays, super shallow tributaries. You're going to be trying to go over logs that are barely submerged through this thick grass that trolling motors and other motors can't get through. And it's going to take you to some of the most magical areas you ever fished, like areas that could be in your backyard that you don't even know about, that even though they're only 20 minutes away from you, can feel like they've taken you away from civilization entirely. And it's going to immerse you in this ambient nature as you stalk these fish. And you need to stalk them because they can be very spooky. So for me, it's definitely kayak because you're almost at water level. It's just about as close as you can be to becoming part of the environment with these fish. And
in a big plastic boat.
Yes.
I believe it was Michael's question about will this take the place of bass fishing? And the other thing that I think is that they're just more difficult to catch than a bass.
I honestly think it depends. It's like
I can't comment.
There's days and areas that I've gone out there and I've had 20, 30, 40 fish snakehead days. And I know guys have had caught even more than that. Because again, they reproduce very quickly, which is again why I'm saying, don't feel bad about harvesting snakehead. But I've had days when snakehead are very easy to catch. And I've seen people classify snakehead as very easy to catch because of those days, but that's not how it always is. It is not at all.
I see him when he comes home. It is not.
Every day you go out fishing for snakehead, you have to reassess what they're doing and what they want. Literally every single trip. And it can change from minute to minute or hour to hour while you're on the water.
I can tell as soon as he walks in the door if he had a good day or a bad day.
So sometimes snakehead fishing is super easy. And sometimes, I'd say actually more of the time, you need to work at it to figure out what pattern they're on that day. So it's but I mean, I agree. They're going to eventually surmount bass fishing, in my opinion.
One question that I wanted to be sure to get in, and we've got a few more minutes, guys. So if you have another question or two, great time to ask it. And we also have to do the prize giveaway. So Adrian, you guys start thinking about what was the question of the night.
It.
But again, I like to think about the person that's just getting into the sport, right? And we've talked about where to start looking for a spot. You've given them a lead into a video that you created for your YouTube channel.
Yep.
But the other part of that is like, what gear do I use, right?
Yeah.
So obviously there's a ton of lures that you can choose. Even I'm getting. Yeah, I'm getting.
Keep going.
But like the rod and reel combo, line, leader, are you using a swivel? If you had one lure to recommend to somebody, amongst all of them. And then the last thing I was going to ask is kayak versus boat versus shore, but we've already talked about that. So let's just talk about if you were just getting started, if you had one rod, one reel, line, leader, and a lure, what's your rig?
So first of all, when it comes to spinning versus bait caster, pick whichever one you're more comfortable with in terms of the reel. But for the rod, you need at least a medium heavy rod. And if you're fishing heavy cover, I suggest it be a heavy action rod. Okay, heavy fast action, put it that way. And for line, nothing less than 30-pound braid. I have never, ever,
it will
ever
snap off so quick.
Yes, I've got away with 20-pound for a long time, but I think it's because I was in my kayak. And when you set the hook in a kayak, the kayak moves towards the fish and takes some of the tension off the line. I've broken several fish off recently, very big ones, fishing from shore with 20-pound test. So use at least 30. Never have I ever used a leader for snakehead. And I haven't suffered for it. I always run straight braid. Aside from that covers the rod, the reel, the line. When it comes to lures, if I had to pick one lure, it's really tough because I don't know if the snakehead are going to be.
Aren't you a mouse guy?
Say again?
Topwater mouse, isn't that your deal?
Well, it's definitely my favorite lure to use. Like I said, I kick around my head it's like a survival situation where I have one lure that's going to be universally effective, or do I want my favorite lure? So
let's go with the former. So we're trying to get someone new to the sport on a fish.
Probably someone new to the sport, a MEPS number 3 or 4.
Not those little ball power bait thingies.
No, not for snakehead. No. But yeah, a MEPS number 3 or 4 is a great starter lure for them. And if you're a little more versed with them and you want to fish all these different environments, I would say probably a weightless. Sorry, did something pop up? I'd say probably a weightless swim bait in like 4 inches, soft plastic, chartreuse, or pearl color.
Got it.
That was very specific.
It was. Hey, I try to be as informative as I can on this channel. We're going to do one more question from Ritz Burgie. I hope I'm getting your name.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Do patterns follow the weather patterns, time of year? What is the best lure to use for times of year? And Ritz, this is a question we were really going to get into. And after this, I'm going to actually talk to Cambo about maybe doing a part 2, maybe not this year, because I'm going to be fishing here pretty soon on Wednesday evening. But like, there's so much info on our agenda that we didn't even touch.
Yeah.
So, sorry, let me show that question again. What is the best lure to use for times of year?
So in the early spring, best lure is going to be your MEPS number 3 or 4, hands down, in my opinion. Once it gets on towards later spring and summer, I'm going to start throwing my swim baits. After that are going to come my buzz baits and my topwater mice and frogs. I'll use essentially all of those same lure classes to include chatterbaits in that variety. Through the summer, on any given day, one of those lure classes might be best. It's really that game of getting on the water and figuring out what pattern they're on. Once it gets towards the fall, I mean, the warmer the weather, the better topwater is. As it starts to cool off, you move into your swim baits, chatterbaits, starts to cool off more, move into your MEPS. And once it gets, like December time frame, late November, that's when you're throwing your minnows under a float. And it's kind of the same thing for the spring. I'll start with minnows under a float, and I'll fan cast my MEPS.
You're the man. All right, guys. So the prize for the evening, is
wait, I had the question.
the invasive. Take your time, Adrian, because I'll let this sizzle.
Yeah, I know it. I got it. Go ahead.
I'll let this sizzle on the screen for a little bit.
Is that the shirt?
It's the invasive slam. It's part of Kambotrout's merchandise.
Yo, he worked really hard on that.
I do my own.
So he does his own artwork. So if you win, just make sure you either friend me, or if you're already friends with me, send me your address and your size, because obviously for a t-shirt, I had to wait for the winner, so you're not walking around with a little belly shirt on if you're 380 pounds.
It's not cute.
But Adrian, you got a winner for us?
Yeah, the ethical dilemma of fishing a fry ball.
Oh,
wasn't that Dave McCollum?
that was Dave McCollum.
The guest for the first episode of the season. People are going to start accusing us of collusion, but Dave.
I have no idea who any of these people are.
Adrian didn't know, right?
Except for Butch, and I didn't pick him.
Butch did have a good question. He had a follow-up that almost made it if we had more time. But
I showed his lure, so yeah, I thought that was a good question.
Yep.
But Dave, just actually, I'll text you later on tonight and get your address.
He's excited.
Steven, Adrian, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for coming on, and we need to do this again real soon.
Hey, thanks, Grant. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for putting up with me.
We love you, Adrian. Have a great night.
Yeah, y'all too.
Just like the man, if you wanna